Hey, okay, I'm going to try and walk you through what my editing process is a little bit, again, with the same grad shoot. So this is actually what the image looks like when it has just been imported with my preset. Obviously, the colors are a little funky, but that's okay. As you can see here, it says white balance, shows it as shot. So this is just what my expo disc was reading to be the correct temperature. Truth be told, I don't think I actually switched it when I came to this spot, which is why the colors are so wonky to start with. But yeah, this is like the raw image if it got pulled in with my preset already applied. So there's a couple things that my preset will do when it gets applied. I use Megan Kelsey's Clean and Classic presets. She now has an upgraded version called Prism presets, and they're also linked in the vault, so you can check those out. I have it just apply on 125. You can obviously like change this to be, so this is what it would look like without her preset applied at all. Obviously this is not properly exposed image, but it's all good. This is what it looks like at, I think, 100, 125. Obviously you can see that the preset is like warming things up for you already, which is why this image looks super warm. I didn't actually shoot it that warm. It looked more like this when it came in. But this is what it would look like at 100, but I have this always applied at 125. You can change that to be like a different value just depending on your own aesthetic. There's a couple things that I do. So generally my base preset will be, it'll pull the highlights way down, it'll bump up the shadows, bump up the whites, and bump up the blacks to these specific values. I tend to overexpose actually when I shoot, so I have this pull the exposure down by 0.3. And then I always have my contrast set to 15 initially. The vibrance I actually do plus 25 and plus 5 for Nikon, but negative 5 for Canon. So if you have a Canon second shooter, I will adjust this to be negative 5 for Canon. That's just like what I have seen to work really well with like the different image types of Canon. Canon tends to have like deeper cyans and oranges. So I feel like adding the vibrance but then pulling back some of the saturation like kind of helps balance things out. My tone curve, I really need to change this to actually be negative 15, but it's a bit of a C curve is what Caitlin James actually teaches in her editing course. And so this is a great way to like make sure you have enough like color and like pop is what she calls it in her images, where they're still bright and light and airy, but you have some contrast to like help it pop, and pulling down the highlights ensures that you're not like blowing out the highlights all the time. So this is the colors tab, and I do use this a very little bit, and I'll walk you through that a little bit later. Split toning is just controls. So this first one up here for highlights will control all the parts of the image that are really bright. So like the columns, but it won't touch anything that's darker. But shadows will affect the darker area. So I'm going to play around with this a little bit. So my default is 30 and 8, and then 30 and 6 for shadows. So this just is heating up. Like here, if you go super, you can see all the parts that were really bright at the image got warmed up really quickly. You take it out, you can see how it's like more green. So I have mine set like default around 8 and at 30. And I generally keep this to be like in the red oranges hue, but if you wanted to make the highlights of your images more blue, then you would just set it to the blue portion, if that kind of makes sense. But I'm going to change that back. Same thing goes for the shadows. So if you take out shadows, it's going to be hard to notice here because there's not a whole lot of shadows in this image. Yeah, it's like really hard to, sorry. There we go. So like her hair is darker, so that's picking up the shadow saturation right here. But same thing goes for this. So this is just what I use for my default preset. I'm just showing you that. I don't sharpen during this most often. I do have it set to export and sharpen a little bit on export for every single image. So here, so I'll sometimes do sharpen for standard. There we go. So that's where I have it sharpened already. So I don't generally sharpen in camera, in Lightroom unless I notice that it needs some sharpening. And then here's where if you have a lot of grain, you can like take this out. But I try not to go above 20 or like 25 maybe for like church ceremonies. But generally, if I have enough like during the day, I don't need to actually do any noise reduction most of the time. So something to note here, I always have this guy enabled, enable profile corrections. If you take it off, you can see it's kind of hard to tell again with this one. It's a pretty bright image, but it kind of like pulls the corners of the images back and brightens them a little bit. Let's see if I can find a better image to show you an example of that from. I'm going to go for, okay, see, maybe this will be more helpful. I've already synced the edits for this one, so I'm going to reset it. Actually, let's see if you can just tell it with this. Okay, so if you notice this left corner, watch it again. Ta-da! Same thing on the top right corner as well. So like this is what it looks like without, this is what it looks like with. So it just kind of like brightens up your overall image and kind of stops the distortion on the edges of your image from the lens being curved. It's kind of just like flattening it out for you. So that's what that guy does. And I have that already applied as a part of my base preset again. I think I forgot exactly which image that I was on, but we can go with this one. So that's pretty much what my base preset will do. And then I don't like change the crop of it or anything upon import. Like I'll do that manually later. This is what my calibration looks like. So version 5 current. And I don't tint anything myself within here. But if you're noticing that your camera is like tinting all your images like purple for whatever reason, you could calibrate it here using that. So let me walk you through a bit of what the editing process looks like. So this is this without anything on it. This is what it looks like at import with these. So the way that I would edit this image is, first thing that I always do is I will adjust the white balance. So here, temperature. I actually tend to just manually type in numbers from eyeballing things, but some people prefer to like switch the slider around. So let's try like 4500 because this is super, super warm. So that's a little bit better. I still think like it's a little too warm for my taste, and I can start to see where like it's looking really greenish to me. So I'm going to bump this up a little bit, and then I'm going to brighten it a couple just to like hit my aesthetic. It's still looking a little too warm for me, so I'm going to go 4600. I hit R. R allows you to pull up the cropping tool, and this like little side guy right here is a little darker, and I want the entire image to be really nice, light and airy. So I'm going to crop that portion out. I try not to crop too much because then your image gets really, really small. But one of the things that I also learned from Caitlin is pay attention to like the sides of your images. Because if you have like a distracting element in the side like this guy, it's going to detract your focus from the main subject, which should be her. So we're going to pull this in. And this is also like looking at the horizon lines, it's looking a little slanted, so I'm just going to pull this, like press it and then pull this guy up to straighten it out a little bit. That's looking a lot better for me. Colors look pretty okay. Here's where I'll go into this color tab. So if you notice her dress, it has kind of lost some of the like vibrancy of the pinks. So I'm going to pull the luminance down here so you can see it's getting a little bit more pink. If you wanted to take the pink out, you can bring the luminance up. If you can also play with like the saturation, so like how much pink is there versus not. And if the pink, like if it was actually a really pastel pink, but it's looking really like purpley, you can kind of change the hue of it as well. So I'm going to just reset that to be whatever it was. But this is looking pretty good. I will say there's like a little bit of some greens going on here in her grad cap. So you can pull some of the greens out or pull some of the blues out and stuff like that. And then I'm being super picky and I still see slight shadow there. So this is what I would probably go with as the finished version of this guy. Let's do another one. So let's see. I'm trying to figure out which ones do I wanna. Okay, this. I'm looking at this and actually let's go with this. So this is what. Let me reset the edits. Oh, and the way that I'm toggling between these two is if you hit G, it pulls up the grid of all the images in the grid. If you hit D, that goes back to the editing profile. So the Lightroom shortcuts are like your best friend for editing really, really quickly as well. So just get familiar with some of the shortcuts. Like this is the crop tool, I believe. So it's R. If you hover over it, it'll tell you clone stamp. I think is it C? No, it's Q. This is red eye reduction. I feel like I don't need to use this very often, but I do use the graduated filter. So that's M. And actually, let me show you what that does. So if I click M, it's going to pull up the graduated filter mask panel. And so I have a couple of different like preset things, and one of them I call background brighten. So all this is here you can manually change what your mask looks like. So if you wanted to make this entire area like a little bit warmer, we'll pull the yellow up. And then background brighten for me is just like increasing the exposure by like 0.39 and pulling up the shadows a little bit. We can also pull the blacks up a little bit. And so you can like manually change what this mask looks like, which is pretty cool. And then now you see this little plus guy in the corner, and so if I click here and drag, it's gonna pull in graduated little light filter. Similarly, if you wanted to, if you hit M again, it like goes away. If you wanted to do a different one, pull this guy up, maybe do darken. If you wanted to darken this corner for whatever reason, you can go in here. So my darken is like negative 0.63. You can kind of see it on the side here, and increasing the contrast. So that's how you can use the filter to add really quick edits. In the same way, you can use this little brush guy. So for some reason, if I wanted to soften skin, like this is way too big of a brush right now, but basically I just have this manual brush to be clarity 100, and it would like smooth out any wrinkles or anything if you use it. So let me go over her grad rib, and you'll kind of like see how it's like blurring out ever so slightly. It's kind of hard to notice, but there you can like kind of see the difference. So that's how I use these guys really quickly. The clone stamp is another good one that you can use within Lightroom. So if I wanted to get these little blurred out picnic people out of here, you can increase and decrease the brush size by clicking the little bracket button that's right above the quote mark on your keyboard. So the left one makes it smaller, so that's why I just click, and then the right one makes it larger, so it's another good shortcut. You click here, and then you can drag so this is where it's being applied, and then you can drag this guy to pull from like right here to easily clone stamp some peeps out if you need to. And then if you hit, I think, M again, it'll go away. Obviously, like this isn't the best edit right here, so actually what I do sometimes if I need to like smooth out a clone stamp is I'll go here and I'll use the soften skin and I'll just brush over it, and it kind of just blends it nicely into the background for you. There's still that green spot, but we're going to let it be for right now. So that's kind of how I easily use some of these tools up here to edit really quickly. Or if there's like a spot of like her dress or something that like for some reason is super, super dark, I can like go here, again you can change the brush size and just easily brush over and like lighten it up a little bit. That's how I use these. Close that tab. You can also just pull it open by like pressing on any of these. Let's go ahead and, sorry, I thought I was going to get hit by a bee. So I massively messed up on the exposure on this guy, so that's obviously my fault. With the base import, it's going to look like this. So again, not great, not terrible. As you can see, there's like a lot of weird, funky like shadows going on with the trees being super dark. So definitely pull this up. I would probably pull up the shadows and the darks a little bit, or definitely, yeah, I would say shadows and the blacks just a little bit to lighten up the entire image as a whole. And then I would come down here, and to retain the like pop in this grab robe, I would probably pull this guy down to deepen that without deepening like these guys too much. I probably actually would, just because this is so super dark and kind of like distracting, and like my style is pretty bright and airy for the most part, but with vibrant touches. I would use this mask right here to brighten this guy up. This is looking a lot better. I do think that this brought it a little bit too green, so I'd probably bring it back up a little bit. Depending on how sunny I want to go. I think actually like 5,500 is probably not the worst. And if I think that this is, I can't tell if this is too contrasting. I like this better at 10. And actually for this one, I'm going to play around with keeping this at 0 just to like get some of the wonky colors out of here. I would straighten this just a little bit. And then again, like, do you see how this like corner is super dark and kind of distracting? I don't want that for the edges of my photo, so I'm going to pull it over just a little bit. I still want to keep her in the center. I'm just going to pull this guy up. There we go. That's a little bit better. Actually, I'm looking at the horizon line here, and I'm like, is that straight? I don't think so. So I'm going to re-straighten it. And basically, I'm just looking at this, and then the little guide that comes up when you press it down. So I'm trying to make sure that it's in line, like around this area, if that makes sense. Hit enter. There we go. This is pretty good. I feel like I would probably deliver this as is. Let's do another one real quick. So I'm hitting G again for the grid. What do I want to edit? Let's do one that's up here. So I'm gonna click on this guy. I shoot super tilted all the time. If you can't tell, I also like tend to crop people's feet out. So I'm working on that as a person and as a photographer, but that's just what happens when I shoot. So again, clicking on the history, you can go back edits. As you can see, like my image, definitely, my preset definitely super brightened things up because this was slightly probably overexposed for her face when I shot it. So, sorry, with the import preset applied again, I like click this way. There we go. First things first, I'm going to pull the brightness down, pull the exposure down a little bit. Let's go with right here. I'm going to hit R. I'm going to crop this. And then this is looking, again, like super cyan-y. It's because I did not reset my Kelvin for this area. Or like reuse my expo. So I'm bringing the tint up and out. Okay, let's see what this looks like. Oops. If you double click on any setting, it's going to go back to its original. So here it's going to go back to 0. I'm going to undo that. I'm going to pull this up to 0, see what that looks like. So this looks a little too pink for me, so I'm going to bring it back down to like -5. Is this, I like sometimes struggle with making sure that it's absolutely like correct for like the horizon line and stuff. So here, like, you can kind of see how I'm like cropping at her ankles, which is not flattering. You always want to crop not at the joints, so either like right above during her calves. You also wouldn't want to crop like right at her knee because that's going to look really awkward, like she's kind of like missing a part of her leg. So you want to crop below the knee. Also with like skirts, if she's wearing a skirt like this, you don't want to crop here because this makes her look like she doesn't have legs that are going to give her like a bit of a slimming effect because it's like you're not as wide as your dress. This sounds to me in pictures. So I would pull it down here and I would probably crop for here so you can see like the dress form fitting on her, but like can still see her legs. So that's kind of like a little rule for cropping. I still feel like this part of the image is not quite straight. So I still kind of struggle with the straightening part of things. But because your eye is going to focus here and like you're probably going to look at this building's horizon lines, I'm going to go with the buildings, what looks straight. Again, it was a super spotty and kind of like partly cloudy day, which is kind of why this area of the image is darker than necessarily like this side where the sun is shining through the clouds. So I'm going to take M and I'm going to brush that real quick. So it's super strong within this quadrant right here, and then it gradually filters out during this. So if I do bring it over too far, it's going to affect her face, and I think her face is a great exposure for right now. So I'm going to leave that be. I like really, again, horizon lines are not my best friend. So this is looking a lot better. I think that I'm going to keep this. And so this is how I edit, and it's pretty quick just because mostly I'm only touching the like crop and transform tool to make sure everything's straight, adjusting the white balance and the tint if necessary, the exposure if it's not properly synced from another image that was already edited for the blog. And then sometimes I'm messing with like the individual colors like I showed you for her dress. But that's about it, and it makes editing pretty fast and easy. So yeah, that's kind of like my main process. I'm still working on all of these, but I figured I'd give you guys kind of like an inside look of how I edit things. Another quick thing here is this happens a lot with the rotunda is like you can see how these steps turn super like cyan blue-ish. So the way that I would fix this is that I would actually go back to this HSL color tab. I would go to the aqua, and you kind of can already see how I already pulled it out. So this is what it was originally. It looks kind of dingy with the steps because that's just how they look in pictures. So I would pull out the saturation, bump up the luminance, and you can already see how it looks a little bit brighter and a little bit cleaner for this. Same thing with the blue. Since she's not wearing blue, I like went ahead and pulled out some of the saturation of the blue. Again, like you can kind of see like the steps look kind of blue, and it reflects all the light from like the sun and stuff too. That's blue. So this is how I just like pull it out real quick. If I wanted to make the steps super nice and bright, I could bump the lights up to 20. That also helps like make a huge difference. Or you could do just the whites here. Not as big of a difference, but still helps a little bit. If you like play with this guy, you can kind of see how it's like brightening up all the lights in here. So that's just a couple things that you can toggle with to help edit really quickly and edit certain parts of the image. So hopefully this was helpful and gives you an insight as to how I edit things. If you have any questions about any of this, please feel free to reach out and I will get back to you on it. If you need help like editing a specific image or anything like that, also feel free to email me, and I would be more than happy to walk you through what I would do to edit any particular image. I know sometimes it's really hard when you can't necessarily control all the the lighting situations, especially at weddings. But yeah, I would love to like help you out with anything that you need help with. So again, thanks for watching this. Let me know if you have any questions. You can pop them in the Facebook group actually, and that way everybody can kind of like see your question and can benefit from like seeing how I would walk through the edits for it. I think that would be a great way to interact with everyone in the Facebook group. So hope you're having a great day, and I will catch you later in another